20 years ago, the issue of what was then called assisted suicide was enormously of interest in this country. Jack Kevorkian was out there, in my opinion, unstably getting a lot of attention. The hospice movement was just on its rise, and there was a lot of attention that was really gaining rapidly to end-of-life conditions. And the beginning of a groundswell in the country of people who wanted to know that they could have the right to end their lives when they wanted to. At the time, the Supreme Court was getting involved. The Supreme Court gave the right to the states in a direct fashion to say the states could do this if they wanted to, although there was no constitutional right. And Oregon makes this decision. And so roughly at that time, I'm thinking, you know, I've known that this practice of assisted suicide has been going around forever. And there are families that were doing this. Certainly during the AIDS epidemic, we were taught by the AIDS community how to hoard medications, which medications worked, how to pass your medications on to the next person if you didn't use them. So I made the decision that I wanted to penetrate what I soon started calling the darkened bedrooms of assisted suicide, by family members, by people who were dying, by what I found were some freelance euthanasists, people who just took it upon themselves, that they liked this idea and it became their business. And I documented a world that was going on at that time by making contacts and going underground, literally, into the world of people who were participating in assisted suicide when it wasn't legal, and learned a huge amount from that. Because I saw what happened when we prohibited it. I saw prohibition from a very deep viewpoint by writing A Chosen Death. The new law in California was sort of opened my eyes. It was very interesting. I have believed in this ability for patients to choose when they want to die, how they want to die, and where they want to die. The challenge is, okay, you know, you've talked about it, you've thought about it, it's really important. Can you do it? And so for me, it was really saying, if this were being provided well, and I could be really reassured that your general physician would do this with you, that your oncologist would hang with you even after the chemotherapy and keep taking care of you, that your palliative care physician, that your hospice people would do everything they could to make you have the best death you possibly can. But if that wasn't working, they would also respect your wishes to die at a certain time. And if I believed that that's what would happen, I would be more than happy to stay away and say, we got what we wanted and it's going to work. What I really believe is that there's going to be a very, very slow startup of physicians who don't want to participate, of patients who can't find the kind of care that they want, and that there's a huge period of education, which is one of the focuses that I have, is of educating both patients and doctors. And so I've decided to open up a practice that will have its sole focus on educating physicians, consulting with physicians who want to participate, and then if there's a patient who cannot find a doctor who will work with them, I'll accept that patient and become their physician, what would then be called the attending physician at the end of life, and I will take on that role and work them through the process, which will not necessarily lead to ingesting any medication. It will lead to a process of considering openly all of the possibilities available to the patient. And I would expect that even in the case where my select population of people get referred to me specifically for that reason, even for that, in those circumstances, few will actually ever take the medication. That there will be other options or just the natural process that goes on. But I will provide that ability to do so if that's what they want. You know, I talk with physicians a lot who tell me that they really believe in this right that patients have, but they just don't want to participate. And in some cases, it's a moral or religious or other reason, but for many physicians, surprising to me, they say, I'm not comfortable with this. It's such an important act. It's such a decisive act. It's so, it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I have to remind them, you know, the first time you opened up somebody's belly, did you feel comfortable? Or did you think, oh, wow, I can make a mistake here and nick their aorta and they could bleed to death? I remember the first time I had to put in a central line, a very invasive thing to do to a patient. And the first thing my physician teacher says to me is, be careful, you might hit the carotid artery in the neck and cause a stroke. And yes, I felt uncomfortable. And yes, I felt queasy. And yes, I went on and understood it's an important thing to know. And please teach me how to do that. And so my answer to physicians who say to me, I'm just not quite comfortable with this is, well, you've been there before. You know what it's like to not be comfortable with a procedure. If you believe in it and you believe it's a patient's right, then you will learn it. and have somebody teach it to you, just like you learned everything else in medicine that made you uncomfortable. It is your responsibility to learn to do things that will benefit your patients. Many, many things we decide are important in medicine. This isn't all that different. We make decisions every day. Should you have this surgery? Should you continue with your cancer chemotherapy? Should you have radiation, or should you have chemotherapy or surgery? Has your cancer now spread enough that you're ready to stop treatment? Those are decisions we make with patients all the time. In every case, we respect what the patient wants. If a patient comes to their oncologist and says, "I'm done, no more chemotherapy for me," the doctor says, "Well, let me give you some information, and then of course I'll respect your wishes." Can you really listen to your patients and ask the right questions, and then shut up and listen and hear what your patients have to say, and then put some of your own feelings aside and understand your patients? Because by doing that, you will be able to aid their deaths, because you then understand what they actually want for themselves and what they need. The idea of family conflict is nothing new. The idea of family conflict comes up whether you want to continue your chemotherapy or not. Somebody, you say, "No, I'm done." Someone in the family says, "Oh, Ma, please continue. We want you to live." Those conversations happen all the time. And what's important to understand about this end-of-life conversation is it happens slowly. It doesn't unfold on Thursday you think you might want to die, and on Thursday afternoon, there we are. The patients are just saying, "I want to have a good death, and I want you to provide it for me no matter what, and I want to call the shots." That's a sea change that's happened from the patients that the legislature and the doctors have been slow to catch up on. Not only that, but the legislature did not get together suddenly in October of 2015 and say, "Guess what, let's do this today." They did it because there was a tremendous groundswell of desire on the part of the population of this state. The doctors who are coming up now, to them, end-of-life discussions, end-of-life questions, the ability to treat the end of life as a part of the process, they've got it before they even start training. This has been part of their conversation, their parents' conversation. They didn't come from the times when these were hidden conversations where you brought it up at the dinner table and somebody said, "Oh, don't talk about that." To someone who's coming at it from a spiritual level, I think it's a different discussion. It is true that many people have a spiritual belief that the natural process towards death, the way God wants it, or whoever your spiritual belief is a healing process. It's your time to come to terms with your life. It's a time to come to terms with your family. It's your time to understand what life is about and to follow that process. And I can respect that. But what I do think is very important is that that's the process, that's your spiritual process. If you're the chaplain, if you're talking to patients about it as their hospice doctor, if you're talking to patients about it, that's very wonderful. It's your spiritual practice, and you can talk to your patients about the fact that you believe that. In the end, though, you're not the one who's dying. And the decision of how spiritual someone wants to be and what spiritual route they want to take is always the person who's taking that route. And so to tell someone there's a natural way to die and we think it's better that you take that route is the equivalent of saying, "You know, the Catholics have it right, the Buddhists do not."